here's your lamp. These are your object settings for the lamp. Camera has its settings here. That's where you can change its how it looks. Orthographic looks really weird with the camera. Um, but that's your basic Blender. Now there are some things down here that are probably looking kind of dark and scary. They're not too bad. If you click these ones, you don't really use much. But if you click on the little cube thing down there, you'll see edit mode that we've already done. Oh, I'm going to turn off the normal faces. That we've already looked at. And sculpt mode is a way of extruding vertices and stuff. It's kind of like real world sculpting. If you were to take a piece of clay and just pull out parts of it, it's kind of hard to explain. Yeah, I haven't done much with it, so we won't get into too much of that. Vertex paint, it's kind of weird. Texture paint, that is something that we might use later, but not right now. And weight paint is something you would use in animation with bones and rigs, but you have no idea what most of that is. But yeah, this is basic Blender 2.57. Compared to Blender, excuse me, Blender 2.49, it's quite a bit different. It's a little bit, uses a little bit more computer power, but it's quite a bit better. See, here's your render settings and stuff, which in Blender 2.57 is located under this little camera thing. But Blender 2.49 is becoming very quickly outdated now, which is why it's a good time to switch now. Lots of tutorials are coming out for the Blender 2.5 series, and it's becoming a whole lot better. Also, there's a few other sections that I should mention, although we will get into them later. If you press Control left arrow, that will get you to the compositing area, which is where you have where you add your lens effects, because cameras don't take perfect pictures. Like as you'll see, I'll show you some of my pictures. Here's my final kitchen render. As you can see, it's not a perfect image. There's a hazy sun effect. There's some glare there, which we wouldn't typically see. There's some chromatic aberration where the lights are, and that just distorts the light a little bit. I have some vignetting, which kind of darkens the corners. It's really quite a scene. Took about 40 hours to render. Let's see. Okay, why are you not showing? There we go. Here's a Christmas tree that I made. I actually made that at the end of spring to remind me of cooler days, because it was getting pretty hot around here. But as you can see, I add some real vignetting. You can really tell the difference. There's a bit of a glare, and in an apartment scene that I made, it was, as you can see, there's some light distortion. This was an earlier one. Doesn't look quite as good as some of my later ones. Subway. Oops, that one wasn't good. See, I have a blur node there in the compositor. So these are just things that the compositor can do. It adds lens distortion. I'm going to shut that down. But that's the basic scene. Animations, if you click animation here, it would render scenes. Sorry, you can hear my little bear in the background. It's getting kind of noisy. Down here, back to this area, you can view, if you press Z, that does a wireframe, so you can see all the edges and sides and stuff. It's pretty cool. If you press Z again, it'll bring you back to a normal one. And if I were to add texture now, you can see it changes with my texture, or my material, I'm sorry. Pivot point, that allows you, per se, to rotate around the 3D cursor, which is pretty cool. You use that, you can set the 3D cursor to the middle of an object that you want it to rotate around. It's useful a lot of times. I use that in my apartment building. It helps with symmetry. You can also set it to individual origins, like if you've selected multiple objects, it'll move them by their individual origins. As you can see, it's sizing them proportionally. But if I do that, then they're sizing out and growing. And if I do active element, then it's sizing down into the active element. The active element is the one with a lighter orange. These have more of a, the not so active elements have a more red color. Oh yes, and one last thing that is major in here is that little dot is the vertex, or the origin, I'm sorry, the origin. And if I were going to go into edit mode, grab the circle and move it over here, that origin stays there. And that's useful for certain things, like in my subway scene I use that to keep things lined up. So I'll delete. And if you ever want to go back into it, you can press Control Alt Shift C and then click Origin to Geometry, and that'll put it back into the thing. So that's basically. Oh yes, this is my rule of thirds. It's used in a lot of art things. I added that in. You don't really need that for your scenes. But that's most of the basics of Blender. If I forgot anything, I'll probably get to it at some point in my other tutorials. Oh yes, last few things. This is particle system that allows you to send out, currently it's going to be glowing little particles. If you go hover over the timeline, that's this, and press Alt A, you can see there's little particles falling off. Kind of weird looking right now. Your frames per second show up there. Slower computers aren't going to run that as well. So I'll delete that particle system. And here's the simulations, physics, something or another. And that's where you can add fluid simulations and smoke simulations and soft body and cloth and all this good stuff that's really hard to use. And believe me, it takes a long time to render. A long time. Like, I made a flamethrower animation and had really high resolution smoke in it. That took forever. It took like 48 hours or something like that. I have no idea. Maybe not quite that much. But it was a long time. One other thing to note, when you're rendering, if you look up here, once it's finished, that'll tell you how long it rendered. Just a basic thing. Oh yes. That's another important thing. You can also split views. That didn't work so well. You can also split views. Here, if you click on that little thing there, the little lines, that it will split the view. And we use that for like when you go to UV image editor. That's going to be something that we might have to do. Hopefully not. And if you grab this, click on it again, point over here, you'll see the arrow, and it'll get rid of it. I think that's pretty much it. There's a few other things like these and render layers, but those are pretty advanced and we won't get into them until at least quite a bit later into the tutorial series. So that's all. See you next time.